The Asia Pacific is on her way back after years of the pandemic amid much uncertainties. Open, connect, and balance. Those are the aspirations, but solemn answers are needed about how. Join me on site at the APEC 2022 in Thailand, the last stop of a series of crucial multilateral engagements this year. We are here to wrap it up with direct analysis and frank interviews, only on World Insight. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thanks to the organizer having a very inclusive topics range, we are also having this topic on gender equity for growth. We have Gita Sabhalvo, who is the UN Resident Coordinator in Thailand. Thank you. And Ms. Katia Indra Vijaya, CEO of K-Bank. Thank you. Last but not least, Tim Dattels. Good to see you. This is a wide range of speakers sitting on the stage. I would love to have them share with us why they're so passionate about this subject.
It's great to have CEOs discussing gender equality alongside hardcore issues of sustainability, net zero growth, and digital transformation. And this is my pitch to you as CEOs, pretty much, right? Before I introduce myself. My pitch to you is the fact that you are discussing issues of gender equality just shows how important it is. Recently, one of the largest investment banks decided not to go public with any company that did not have a woman board member on it. And they did it not because it made moral sense, but because it made good financial sense. Studies are now showing that the more diverse a company or an organization you have results in greater returns to profit.
And your personal experience from peacekeeping, peace building, to now development also
Absolutely.
Would be...
And Tian, I'm only going to take a minute to talk about that. I'm the UN Resident Coordinator. I bring the UN system together here in Thailand, 21 UN agencies focused on delivering sustainable development goals here. Together, in close partnership with government, with the private sector, and civil society organizations. And it's interesting, I started during my student days with volunteering, which helped me understand what poverty meant to normal people. And I began my career by working with a women's organization, mobilizing rural women to save money and create their own savings and credit program. And I know, Tim, you are also going to be speaking to that. Savings of $1 a month is what enabled these rural women to slowly start securing their livelihoods. And to me, those 4 years that I spent in the remote parts of India remain my reference point in life, even today. They have influenced my values and the beliefs that I hold today, right? So it's from the rural villages of India to heading the UN here in Thailand with a focus on advancing sustainable development goals. And I'm going to pause here, hand it back to you.
Yeah, it's a great personal saga and a reflection of how women actually are becoming ever more with gender equity in the region. Thank you. Let's go to Katia.
สวัสดีค่ะคัตยานะคะ I'm the first non-family female CEO of K-Bank.
Here, worth a warm round of applause.
I think, I got this opportunity because of our former chairman and CEO and all the board of directors. So to say that is like, we need opportunities, we can rise, we can thrive, when we get equal opportunities. And a little bit about K-Bank. We are the first Thai commercial bank to sign the UN principle for responsible banking, first Thai bank in 2020.
Including gender equity, of course.
Yes, yes, is so passionate of doing the sustainability activities. We are the traditional bank which infusing DNA of the challenger bank, ready to serve the unbanked and underbanked customer, and also the new generation with the new idea.
The reason she's mentioning that is because in those index, there's a lot of issues related to the gender equity we are talking about today.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for giving us this example in the Thai business. Thank you. Let's go to you, Tim. Here's our gentleman volunteer.
Thank you. I'll just say one or two things quickly. I spent the last 30 years of my life, first at Goldman Sachs running investment banking in Asia, and then at TPG Capital as an investor in the region. And so I've largely spent my career in the emerging markets. But on the gender issue, we're going to talk about the lower emerging markets as well and women engagement. And I'll talk a bit about what's happening in North America. But I'd start with the fact, something that I'm proud of as a Canadian, when Prime Minister Trudeau ran for Prime Minister initially, despite the fact that parliamentarians were a little more than a third female, he campaigned on a policy of gender equity in the cabinet, and he delivered. That single thing absolutely changed gender in Canada, and it's trickled down through all aspects of society, from athletes to spending to corporation boards, and it's made a huge difference. And when I was watching the parade of executives and leaders from governments, it was like a male fashion show. So it's, you have to ask yourself the question as well, whether if there were more women leaders in government at the highest level, maybe we wouldn't have the conflict we see in the world today.
So may I ask you a question about quota versus quality? Whether, quote unquote, women are in the powerful position only because the quota. And will that lead to a better growth of both genders, including women?
I did some research, and at the very beginning, the meaning of these two words is kind of interchangeable. But when you look at dig deeper in the word gender equity, is more beyond that. The equity is about the realizing that not everyone has an equal background or initial cost. So if we want the same result, we have to put more resources and more opportunity to that. So that's why quota is come. If we look through that, so it's like, the underprivileged, the one who didn't get opportunity can be race, gender or, education or demographic that they were born. That's why quota is important for this issue. And because of this, when we talk about growth, it's not only the economic growth. It's about the well-being, and it's about the happiness. It has to be balanced. The country can grow that fast and that high. However, there will be the larger income gap and social problem.
What about for you, Jita?
Tian, quotas are not a bad word, right? Historically, if you look at it, it's helped get women into political space, economic spaces, right? And they have delivered. We've seen that across countries in Asia, and probably the time has come to move beyond quotas. And I want to start off with what the UN Secretary General did. When he took office, he was committed to having equal number of men and women in senior positions across the United Nations, right? He was committed to that, and he delivered on that. So we've got 90 men and 90 women in senior positions across the UN. And I'm a reflection of that. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that. In fact, now the Secretary General is moving on to seeing how he can get equal number of men and women across the United Nations, across levels. Now, having said that, in today's world, with the kinds of crises that we have faced, I believe we need to focus on three other things, in addition to quotas. One is we need to focus on skills, getting women equipped with skills. ICT, STEM fields. We want more women in ICT and STEM fields where they are underrepresented, right? Secondly, social protection is extremely critical. And you know that women in the informal economy, where largely they are employed, do not have very little social protection. We need to get some kind of an entry-level social protection package for sectors where women are employed. For example, domestic workers. Right, which helps secure their livelihoods. And the third thing is unlocking financing for women entrepreneurs, extremely critical.
I agree that quota is not a bad word. And sometimes you have to force issues because humans hire and promote people more like themselves. It's a fact. So there's no either or here, because if you look at the top 300-400 organizations in North America, the organizations that have top quartile gender support outperform on value creation by about 27%. And that's a longitudinal study. So it's a benefit. The issue, I think, today at entry level is roughly balanced. But there's a problem at the first rung, because what's happening is in the C-suite, by the time women move along that progression to the C-suite, it's at about a quarter women in the C-suite now versus entry. And the key move is in that first step. And organizations have to completely rethink how they train people, how they hire, how they incent, and focus around gender. And it's taking organizations to repurpose themselves, including myself, I might add.
I know you've been doing a lot of investment in that regard, gender awareness as well. Thank you for that. But may I throw in an even more complicated factor, the pandemic. We've seen over the past 3 years, gender equity has been putting from the very top of priorities for many governments to now to the lower ranking of priorities. That is just a matter of fact. I'm not just trying to say diplomatically. And how do we see this reality? What does that mean for us when we want to restart, or we start with a higher level of quality?
To me, there's an opportunity here, because if you survey, in North America at least, 50% of males are either work in the office or work remotely or in flexible schedule prefer. Women prefer 67% flexible work pattern. So, you know, to me, organizations, if they want to retain and motivate and see women go through the organizations and end up in the C-suite and therefore have more profitable businesses and more balanced hiring and recruiting and progression, have to think about not biasing against people that want more remote work. And with technology, it's completely achievable today, completely achievable. So it's within grasp.
Many of the ladies and gentlemen here, they're running real businesses. There are a lot of things going on every day. Sustainability, of course, within sustainability, there's also gender equity. But how to make them into a systemic approach, how to establish that system so that many business leaders will be able to function. That is really the key here, right?
In today's world, right, especially in middle-income country contexts, the challenges that women face look very, very different from the previous generations, right? Which means that we need to bring to bear, especially in a post-COVID kind of a context, we need to bring to bear new thinking. We need to bring to bear innovation in addressing some of these challenges. And to me, there are two in particular that I want to highlight. The first is the structural barriers that women are facing, and specifically in a post-COVID context. Look at the labor force. Exactly what Tim said. we're seeing a declining work participation rate for women, right? And the gap is widening between men and women. That means fewer number of women to men that are working. In the context of Thailand, if I'm not mistaken, it's 59% of women that are working versus 75% of men in the labor market, right? And we are also seeing that a lot of women are dropping out of the labor market, which means that their opportunities to graduate, to progress into senior positions reduces that much more. And that's a structural barrier. And COVID has made it much, much tougher for women, right? The second thing linked to the labor market is informality that I mentioned, right? Persistent informality. Every other woman and I'm sure the numbers are much, much higher for Southeast Asia, every other woman works in the informal economy, right? Which means low pay, low skills, and very, very little social security. Structural barrier needs to be addressed, become even worse post-COVID. And the third element linked to this is the wage gap between men and women for the same job, right? Globally, if I'm not mistaken, it's 77 cents that a woman earns versus to $1 for a man for the same job, right? In Thailand, it's much better. But this wage gap needs to be bridged between men and women. And during COVID, it's again become worse, right? And my second point is violence against women, gender-based violence. During COVID, we saw a steep spike in gender-based violence. By default, you understand why it happens, right? And data is saying that every other woman across Asia-Pacific experiences violence in some form or the other. Mm-hmm. And violence takes away the agency and the opportunity to participate equally. Again, a structural factor that has been inherent in society that needs to be addressed, not just at home, but even at the workspace.
You know, when at this stage of economic recovery, the capacity building from your perspective, what are they, how they could be done in terms of gender equity for growth?
Removing bias is very, very hard in organizations at all levels. And so you really have to have it be, if you're not in the room, that's okay. If you're at home, that's okay. And you have to train managers. It has to be in their critical evaluations at year end. You have to pay for performance around gender, and you have to manage it, you have to monitor it, and that's a whole rethinking of organizations. The other thing is that organizations are also powerful because they have massive supply chains. So what we've seen is organizations, like organizations used to do with labor rights, with respect to gender. So they're analyzing supply chains, whether it's gender or minority, and to try to understand how can we drive gender, because we have, as a corporation or an organization, huge buying power, a huge ability to be able to affect not just our organization, but the whole chain. And I think that this is a complete change in the way companies are managing and thinking about it, and those that get it right will succeed at a higher level.
I want to look at capacity building. It's important. It's very important for the United Nations, right? And when I say it's important, it looks different in each country context, depending on the country, and that's where the cultural context comes in, right? In the context of Thailand, the areas that we are prioritizing for capacity building are, as I said, STEM and ICT industry. We are also looking at sectors of beauty, services, poultry, and farming, because those are the sectors where women are largely employed, right? What does capacity building look like under this? We are focusing on critical soft skills, hard skills, and data analytics. And this is specifically for the ICT and STEM. Once we've trained about 2,000 women in these skill sets over the past year, the courses have been accredited and have been institutionalized as part of the Vocational and Educational Training Center here. So what does that mean? That means that the entire capsule of capacity building is being taken forward through the vocational training centers, right? Secondly, in the beauty and services and poultry sector, what is it that we are doing? We are focusing on getting women online, enhancing their online presence, to have access to greater market information, which is extremely critical, and also helping address the accessing financial services, right? Extremely critical. And this is what capacity building means. This is what secures livelihoods. Now, to give you one last quick example on migrant women. Right? Migrant women, as you know, are critical to the economy of this country and to that of Southeast Asia. Right? We are focusing on capacity building at home and the workspace for women migrants, knowing that they live in very close housing quarters that can result in violence. Right? We are empowering them to know their rights, right? Just helping them to know their rights. We are working with them on safer migration schemes. So using blockchain to ensure that their contracts cannot be tampered with. The payments are made electronically, right? A simple way of doing this. And thirdly, helping them to understand access services and even access grievance mechanisms that become important. So that's the kind of capacity building that we are doing at the grassroots.
Crucial. You talk about financing. We got two finance experts on the stage, by the way. So Tim, we start from you and go to Katia.
Oh, yeah, I want to just pick up on a comment. Katya is the banker, but
You're not here to tell us what to do, but what you are doing already.
You just think about this market. Japan has 3 choices for their workforce: robots, immigration, or women. I'd pick women. China, no population will age faster than China. They have to deal with that in the workforce. On the finance side, it's inclusion in the emerging markets because it's a massive opportunity for enhancing GDP. And one of the things that I've had the pleasure of working on in Indonesia is the banking sector. We worked with a bank called BTPN. And one of the brilliant things they did, it's the largest Muslim population in the world, is that they created branches where only women could enter. And that was a very comfortable way, and they were doing term loans as opposed to, payday loans, essentially, that was available in the market, lowered the borrowing cost, and it led to just a dramatic increase in women-driven businesses at the SME level. By the way, that bank had a 12.5% net interest margin, and SMBC now owns it. It was the most profitable bank in the world.
Yeah, like I said, we want to lend to the unbanked and underbanked. The numbers that you just present is inspiring. So, we are doing the test and learn. In our portfolio for the unbanked and underbanked, and maybe one of the portfolio, because this is already the hard number, but it's global statistics. So in terms of for example, K-Bank can issue gender bond. We need a hard statistic as well, the Thailand one, and we might have a test on the campaign on the and the test. They have a group test group and the control group and see, which gender, have performed, or, can be even more, race, demographic, or, business or whatever. And, we show that with the hard number from our test and learn. And then we issue, bond, and it might, be interesting to, the investor. And, so because the bond, for example, the green bond, for K-Bank issue green bond, the same rate as the general bond. So, we hope that one day, the statistic of the gender bond and the general one, will be different because of this hard statistic that show that women, who is the owner or who run the business have a better result.
How to make sure gender equity is in the genes. Can Asia Pacific region be a leader in that direction?
And my number at you is 43% of the CFOs in Thailand are women, right? And that speaks to your issue of gender being in the DNA of the private sector, right? We just want that replicated across other sectors, right? And similarly with CEOs, we know in this country, and Khun Katya, your number of CEOs in this country are amongst the highest in Southeast Asia.
Yes, yes.
Right? So that's another number that we need to, that shows that the private sector can lead the way, right? We want other sectors picking this up. We are working together with the regulator here, the Securities and Exchange Commission, to see how we can integrate gender and diversity as part of the ESG principles.
Wonderful. Okay.
Right? And that's another way of integrating gender into the DNA of a country.
Thank you for your work. Katya, please.
I
1
think-
minute.
Okay, I will not breathe. We have to walk the walk. You know, we have to walk the walk and we have to work together. So like I mentioned at the very beginning, I get this opportunity from my former chairman and this former CEO, who is a male, you know, and all the board of directors with the mix of diversity of gender. So, you know, we have to give everyone a chance, you know, an equal opportunity. And, you know, just to be scientific, the measurements, the plan, the execution, the relentless, you know, execution through, you know, the governments, you know, the transition of the government, because the result cannot yield within one government period.
So it's mainly the awareness plus systemic building in the governance, both for the governments and also for businesses as well. Thank you. Tim?
Well, I'll be quick. If you look at North American post-secondary education, there's more women than men in post-secondary education. And yet, in STEM, right now, in engineering jobs and technical jobs, there's 2.5 times more men than women in technical jobs. And that's worsened in the last 5 years. Worsened largely due to COVID, but other things. It's just unacceptable. It's just management, it's process, it's focus, and it's got to start at the top.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's not about slogan, it's about pragmatism. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.